Good to be with you, Marcia.
Such an interesting statement from the Prime Minister. Is this real leadership? Is this stubbornness? I mean, what's your take on it?
I think it's both those things because he does have a stubborn streak to him. He's very, mindful of his place in society, and he wants to make sure people understand that he's doing things from a good place. He talks about future generations, and he's allowed to, because after 8 years of really not doing very much to meet Canada's international obligations, we've got a carbon tax. We've put a price on carbon. It's going to have an effect on bringing down our greenhouse gas emissions, and Canada is required to do that under international agreements that we've signed. So that's for the good part. Remember when we saw the book that was written by Bill Morneau, and he said, it's always about Trudeau. It's always about him. It's never about the big picture. Trudeau is now trying to define himself differently than that. He's also defining himself very differently from Pierre Poilievre, who practices a type of politics that was correctly described by Aaron O'Toole as politics by algorithm. He looks at what's popular on any given day, and that's what he says that day. Trudeau has been staking out a lot of turf here. He had to back down. I don't think he had any political choice in Atlantic Canada on home heating oil. Predictably, that brought on a wave of other requests. Our province uses mostly natural gas. Why don't you exclude us? So he's drawn a line in the sand, as has his environment minister, who's basically come out and said that he's going to quit if there are any more climb downs on the carbon tax. What's going to happen, though, is interesting because not a lot of people are focusing on this. This is a system that was first described by a couple of American politicians, old-timers from the Republican Party, James D. Baker III and George Shultz, recently passed. And they said, look, if you want to deal with greenhouse gas emissions, if you want to start fighting global warming seriously, put a high price on carbon, make sure that there's a rebate back to families. So nobody's talking about taking it away from the companies. Even Poilievre doesn't talk about taking the carbon tax away from companies. And then you have offsets at the border. It's a smart plan. It's the one that we're putting in place. It's not the best one. The best would have been a cap and trade system, but it's too late to get there. So what Trudeau's doing is adding, for example, in Ontario, 3 cents to a litre of gas. A couple of provinces are excluded. Marcia, it's worth mentioning that British Columbia already has a carbon tax, so they're excluded. Quebec has a deal called the WCI, Western Climate Initiative, with California. Now, Ontario used to be part of that deal, and it's Doug Ford that withdrew from the WCI. And Ontario would not have the carbon tax or the carbon tax increase were it not for that. But what's going to happen is, as part of this system, the rebate checks that go to families are sizable. They're as high as $1,800 per year in a province like Saskatchewan. So Scott Moe is staking a lot on this. He's the premier of Saskatchewan heading into an election. He's saying, look, I'm not even going to obey federal law. That's quite a heady brew from a provincial premier. But he's forgetting that as this is rolling out, families in his province are going to start getting sizable checks that would continue. Now, not every family gets them. Only about 8 out of 10 will see some of that money, and fewer than that, it will see all of that money. But it is an important part of the process that Trudeau's put in place, and it has to be recalled that it's all for a good reason, to be able to continue to live on this planet in future generations. We are at a crisis point. And if watching last summer's wildfires and the flooding in California and all of the serious, catastrophic climate events that we're witnessing that had all been predicted, you don't understand that global warming is real, then continue to be with Poilievre. Poilievre will do everything he can to deny that he's a climate change denier. But when you deny that you have to put a price on carbon and lower the quantity of greenhouse gases we're putting out, you're a climate change denier. And, he can say as much as he wants to the contrary, but that's where we are right now in Canada.
Okay, so is there a middle ground here? I mean, the Prime Minister seems very firm that he's not going to back down. The premiers seem to be growing in number, although I don't know if there's any more that could jump on this let's put it off bandwagon. So do you see some sort of political, I don't know if you want to call it a solution, but some sort of middle space to take the heat off the Prime Minister? Or do you think this is going ahead on April 1st?
He's decided he wants to have the spotlight put on him over this. He doesn't mind getting a bit of heat over this because it allows him to finally define on his terms a dividing point between him and Poilievre. Poilievre's had an easy game of it. I'm going to make your groceries cheaper. You don't have to worry about future generations. Forget about a price on carbon. oh, everything is going to be so easy. We're going to balance the budget, but he swears he's not going to cut any social programs. We all know that that's impossible. So that's the easy part of saying all you got to do is. Trudeau's living in the real world, prime minister of a G7 country, signatory of the Paris Accord, like most of the other countries in the world, and we have international obligations that we're going to respect. And so if Trudeau wants to have any fight with Poilievre that will resonate with the more progressive voters in Canada, and it's worth bearing in mind that even though he's at 40%, that means there's a heck of a lot of Canadians who are not going to be voting Conservative. Trudeau's talking to them and saying, listen to what this guy is saying. It's dangerous for your kids and for your grandchildren. Yes, he's talking about the price of housing, and we're starting to address that. And it was an absolute failure on the Liberals, especially with the higher numbers of immigration with no planning. Not against immigration. It's just I'm against immigration at that level with no planning. And that's what the Liberals are going to have to wear. But Trudeau's starting to stake out new turf here. And I'm expecting him to start doing other things similar to that, saying, this is who I am. Look at who the other guy is, because for the past year, Poilievre's had a free game. He's been doing the defining. Trudeau's finally starting to fight back.
Tom Mulcair for us. Tom, as always, thanks so much. Tom is our CTV News political commentator and the former leader of the NDP.